Welcome back to the channel everyone, and thank you for joining me today, because what you are about to hear might completely change the way you look at the loose change in your pocket, the dusty jars on your shelves, and the forgotten coins tucked away in old drawers, because today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and controversial stories in American coin collecting, the legendary 1958 D-Wheat penny that some collectors believe could be worth as much as $36 million. A single cent that has captured imaginations, sparked debates, fueled treasure hunts, and turned ordinary people into hopeful dreamers. And as we explore this story together, I invite you to settle in, imagine the era, feel the weight of history, and consider how tiny mistakes and rare possibilities can transform something so small into something unbelievably valuable, because the 1958 D-Wheat penny represents far more than copper and zinc. It represents the magic of minting errors, the mystery of transitional years, and the endless human fascination with rarity and chance. And to truly understand why this coin has been rumored to command such a staggering price, we need to start by stepping back into the late 1950s, a time when America was changing rapidly, when optimism and anxiety walked hand in hand, when the United States Mint was producing millions upon millions of pennies every year to fuel a growing economy, and when the familiar wheat ears on the reverse of the Lincoln cent were nearing the end of their long and iconic run, because 1958 was the final year that the wheat penny design was officially struck, making every coin from that year historically significant even before we consider errors or mistakes. And when you add the Denver Mint into the equation, indicated by the small d mint mark beneath the date, things become even more interesting, because the Denver Mint was known for high production numbers but also for occasional striking anomalies that slipped through quality control, especially during times of heavy demand and fast-paced production. And in 1958 the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of wheat pennies, most of which are worth only a few cents today, but hidden among those masses, according to collectors and speculative legends, may exist a handful of extraordinary pieces that defy expectations, coins that display unusual characteristics so rare and so dramatic that they elevate the humble penny into the realm of multi-million-dollar collectibles. And one of the most talked about possibilities involves the idea of major die errors, because at the heart of many ultra-valuable coins lies a mistake made during the die creation or striking process. And in the case of the 1958 D-Wheat penny, some believe that certain examples may have been struck with doubled dies so strong that they dramatically altered the appearance of Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions, creating bold doubling that is visible even without magnification. And while minor doubling is relatively common and often dismissed as machine doubling, true double die errors occur when the die itself is impressed more than once at slightly different angles, resulting in a coin that permanently carries that duplication. And if a true and dramatic double die were discovered on a 1958 D-Wheat penny, it would already be considered extremely valuable due to the final year status of the wheat design. But the rumors go further, suggesting not just doubling but extreme doubling, the kind that turns letters into shadows of themselves and dates into stacked numbers, a level of error that immediately places a coin into elite territory. And then there is the even more tantalizing possibility of mule errors, coins struck using mismatched dies that were never meant to be paired together, such as a wheat penny obverse combined with a reverse intended for a different year or even a different design altogether. And while confirmed mules involving wheat pennies are exceedingly rare, the sheer scale of production at the Denver Mint in 1958 leaves room for speculation that an experimental or transitional die could have been accidentally used, especially as the Mint was preparing to shift to the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959. And transitional periods in minting history are notorious for producing some of the most valuable and mysterious errors known to collectors, because they represent moments when old and new designs coexist, when leftover dies, planchets, and hubbing processes overlap in unexpected ways. And speaking of planchets, another major factor that could contribute to the astronomical valuation of a 1958 D-Wheat penny is the possibility of off-metal strikes. Coins struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even other countries, And if a 1958 D-wheat penny were discovered struck on a silver planchet, a brass planchet, or an experimental alloy not meant for cents, it would instantly become one of the most important error coins in American numismatics, because such mistakes are not only rare but also provide physical evidence of minting processes gone awry. And while no officially confirmed example of a silver or wrong metal 1958 D-wheat penny has been publicly authenticated to date, the numismatic world is full of surprises, and new discoveries continue to surface even decades later, often emerging from estates, old collections, or rolls of coins that sat untouched for generations. And this leads us to another fascinating aspect of the $36 million valuation, the role of condition, because even the rarest error coin can lose significant value if it is heavily worn, damaged, or altered. But when an extraordinary error survives in near-perfect or mint-state condition, the value can multiply exponentially. And imagine a 1958 D-wheat penny with a dramatic doubled die, struck on the wrong planchet, exhibiting full original luster, sharp details, and no signs of circulation. Such a coin would not just be rare, it would be unique or nearly so, and uniqueness is one of the most powerful drivers of value in the collecting world, because when only one example is known or believed to exist, competition among elite collectors can push prices into unimaginable territory, especially when those collectors view the coin not only as a collectible but as a historical artifact and an investment. And this is where the story of the 1958 D-wheat penny crosses from traditional numismatics into legend, because the $36 million figure is not just about what the coin is, but about what it represents: the final wheat penny year, the Denver Mint, potential minting chaos during a transitional period, and the human tendency to assign enormous value to objects that combine rarity, mystery, and narrative. And another error often discussed in connection with ultra-valuable pennies is the possibility of missing or misplaced mint marks. And while mint mark errors are more commonly associated with earlier decades, there remains speculation that a 1958 D penny could exist with a missing D or an oddly positioned mint mark due to grease-filled dies or repunched mint mark anomalies. And if such an error were combined with other factors like doubling or off-metal strikes, it would further enhance the coin's desirability, because layered errors are far rarer than single errors, and collectors pay a premium for coins that display multiple unusual characteristics. And then there is the controversial topic of intentional mint experimentation, because during the 1950s the United States Mint was quietly testing different alloys and production techniques, some of which were never officially released. And while most experimental pieces were meant to be destroyed, history has shown that some escaped into circulation, either accidentally or through unofficial channels. And if a 1958 D-wheat penny were proven to be an experimental strike using a non-standard composition, it would represent a previously unknown chapter in mint history, making it priceless to researchers and collectors alike. And this is one reason why authentication and provenance are so critical when discussing coins of this magnitude, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the numismatic community relies on expert grading services, metallurgical analysis, and documented histories to separate genuine rarities from altered coins or hopeful misunderstandings. And yet, despite the skepticism that naturally surrounds multi-million-dollar penny stories, the fascination persists, because time and again coins once thought impossible have been discovered, authenticated. Next. 1951 wheat penny today. Whether you are a long-time collector, a casual coin enthusiast, or someone who just discovered that the small change in your pocket might secretly hold life-changing value, today's story is one that captures imagination, curiosity, and the thrill of possibility, because we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and talked-about coins in American numismatic lore, the 1951 Lincoln wheat penny, a coin that at first glance looks ordinary, humble, even forgettable. Yet under the right circumstances and with the right combination of errors, mistakes, and extraordinary minting anomalies, has been rumored and theorized to reach an astonishing value of up to $23 million, and as we explore this remarkable penny together, you will begin to understand how a single cent struck more than 7 decades ago in San Francisco could become one of the most valuable pieces of copper in existence, how minting technology of the early 1950s created opportunities for rare errors, how historical context plays a crucial role in desirability, and how the tiniest imperfections can transform a common coin into a legendary treasure, because the story of the 1951 sweet penny is not just about money, it is about history, chance, craftsmanship, and the idea that something small can become something priceless. So let's begin by placing ourselves back in the early 1950s, a time when the United States was emerging from World War II, entering the Korean War era, and experiencing a rapidly changing industrial and economic landscape, during which the San Francisco Mint was working under intense pressure to produce millions of coins for a growing economy, and in 1951 alone, the San Francisco Mint struck more than 136 million Lincoln wheat pennies, which on the surface suggests abundance and low value. Yet it is precisely within such massive production numbers that rare errors can hide, because when machines run non-stop, dies wear down, planchets get mixed, and human oversight becomes imperfect, creating the perfect environment for mistakes that would later become numismatic miracles. And one of the most important aspects of the 1951 wheat penny is that it was produced during the final decade of the wheat reverse design, a design that collectors already cherish deeply, as it represents the classic era of the Lincoln cent before the switch to the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959, and this alone gives the coin historical appeal. But history alone does not make a penny worth millions. What makes the 1951 sweet penny so extraordinary are the rare and often hypothetical combinations of errors that, if discovered together on a single specimen, could propel its value into the stratosphere, starting with the most famous and impactful category of error, the doubled die. And while most collectors are familiar with doubled dies on earlier wheat cents like the famous 1955 doubled die obverse, it is widely believed that subtle doubled die varieties exist for the 1951 as well, and a dramatic, fully separated doubled die obverse showing strong doubling on Lincoln's profile, the date, and the inscriptions could be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, because doubled dies occur when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions from the hub, and during the early 1950s, hubbing technology was still prone to such errors. And if a 1951 sweet penny were found with bold, unmistakable doubling visible to the naked eye, especially combined with other errors, its value would skyrocket beyond traditional price guides, potentially reaching the multi-million-dollar range due to its uniqueness. And speaking of uniqueness, another critical factor that could elevate this coin to legendary status is the possibility of a wrong planchet error, because during this period, the United States Mint produced coins of multiple denominations using different metal compositions, and occasionally, blanks intended for foreign coins or other denominations found their way into the penny presses. And if a 1951 sweet penny were struck on a silver planchet, or even more astonishingly, on a gold or experimental alloy planchet, it would instantly become one of the rarest coins ever made, because no official record exists of such strikes, meaning any confirmed example would be a numismatic sensation, and collectors would compete fiercely for ownership, driving its value into the tens of millions, especially if the coin's authenticity were verified by multiple grading services and metallurgical analysis confirmed the anomalous composition. And beyond wrong planchets, there is also the highly coveted off-metal error, such as a penny struck on a dime or quarter planchet, resulting in a smaller or larger coin with missing design elements. And while off-metal errors already command high prices, a 1951 example in pristine condition would be virtually priceless, particularly if paired with a sharp strike and clear date and mint mark. And then there is the realm of transitional errors, which are among the most mysterious and valuable in all of numismatics, because transitional errors occur when a mint accidentally uses dies or planchets intended for a different year or composition during a transition period. And while 1951 is not officially known as a transitional year for the Lincoln cent, rumors and theories persist that experimental alloys and test planchets were being evaluated behind the scenes due to rising metal costs during the Korean War, and if a 1951 sweet penny were discovered struck on an experimental alloy never intended for circulation, it would represent a missing piece of mint history, a tangible artifact of experimentation that escaped into the public, and such a coin would likely be acquired by a museum or elite private collector for a staggering sum, potentially approaching or exceeding $23 million, and of course, one cannot discuss the value of error coins without mentioning die breaks, cuds, and retained cuds, which occur when a piece of the die breaks away, leaving raised blobs of metal on the struck coin, and while many die breaks are minor and common, a massive, dramatic cut affecting a large portion of the design, especially on Lincoln's portrait or the wheat stalks, could transform a 1951 penny into a visually stunning rarity, and if that cud were the result of a terminal die state, meaning the die was on the verge of complete failure, the coin would represent the final moments of that die's life, adding historical significance to its visual appeal. And then there are strike-through errors, where foreign objects such as grease, metal shavings, or cloth interfere with the striking process, leaving unique impressions on the coin. And while most strike-throughs are modest, an extreme strike-through creating an abstract, almost artistic distortion of the design could elevate the coin into a category of one-of-a-kind art, blending numismatics with visual intrigue, and collectors often pay extraordinary premiums for coins that tell a story through their appearance, and beyond physical errors, condition plays an enormous role in valuation, because a 1951 sweet penny in average circulated condition is worth only a few cents, but in pristine, mint state condition with full original luster, sharp strike, and no post-mint damage, its value increases exponentially, and if an error coin of this caliber were found in near perfect condition, it would be almost miraculous, because error coins often suffer from rough handling or circulation wear, so a flawless error specimen suggests it was pulled from circulation early or preserved intentionally, adding another layer of rarity. And mint mark placement itself can be a source of intrigue, because the small s beneath the date was punched into the die by hand during this era, meaning variations in position, size, and shape exist, and a repunched mint mark, where the s was punched more than once in slightly different positions, can create dramatic doubling or overlapping effects, and while repunched mint marks are collectible on their own, an extreme example combined with other major errors could elevate the coin into elite territory, and then there is the possibility of a missing or malformed mint mark due to grease-filled dies, which could make a 1951 appear to be a Philadelphia issue at first glance, and such deceptive anomalies fascinate collectors because they challenge assumptions and require careful analysis. And another factor contributing to the legendary valuation of a hypothetical $23 million 1951 sweet penny is provenance, because a coin's documented history of ownership can dramatically influence its value, and if such a coin were discovered in an old collection, estate, or hoard with clear documentation tracing it back decades, it would add credibility and mystique, and collectors are willing to pay enormous premiums for coins with compelling stories. Next. 1953 wheat penny today, because what we're about to talk about might completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your pockets, jars, drawers, or old coin collections passed down through your family, because today we're diving deep into one of the most mysterious, talked about, and jaw-dropping Lincoln wheat pennies ever discussed among collectors, the 1953 wheat penny, a coin that on the surface looks ordinary, unremarkable, and barely worth a second glance, yet behind that simple copper face lies a storm of errors, minting mistakes, production quirks, historical coincidences, and extremely rare possibilities that have driven rumors, collector demand, and speculative values as high as $12 million for the right example, and that's not hype without reason, because the world of coin collecting isn't just about age, it's about rarity within rarity, mistakes that shouldn't exist, errors that slipped through when millions of coins were struck, and moments when metal, machinery, and human oversight collided in ways that created something truly unique, and the 1953 DWEAT penny sits right at the intersection of all of that history and possibility. So let's start by setting the stage, because understanding why this coin can be worth so much begins with understanding the era in which it was made, the Denver Mint's operations in the early 1950s, and the broader context of the Lincoln Wheat Penny series as a whole, which had already been in circulation for over 4 decades by the time 1953 arrived, having first appeared in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and by the early 1950s the wheat penny was so common in American life that few people paid it much attention. Children bought candy with them, adults tossed them into cash registers, and banks counted them by the bag without hesitation. Yet behind the scenes the United States Mint was under intense pressure to produce massive quantities of coins to support a booming post-war economy, and that pressure is where the story of the 1953 DWEAT penny truly begins, because in 1953 the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents using high-speed presses, aging equipment, and a workforce tasked with maintaining output over perfection, and when you combine speed, volume, and mechanical wear, you open the door for errors, some small, some dramatic, and some so rare that they almost feel mythical, and collectors today know that the most valuable coins are often the ones that were never supposed to exist at all, and among the most significant possibilities surrounding the 1953 DWEAT penny are double dies, repunched mint marks, off-metal strikes, wrong planchet errors, dramatic die breaks, die clashes, misaligned dies, clipped planchets, lamination errors, and even transitional metal anomalies, each one representing a different kind of mistake that could elevate a 1-cent coin into the realm of high-value collectibles. And when multiple factors align on a single coin, the value doesn't just add up, it multiplies, which is how theoretical and reported values can reach into the millions, and sometimes even beyond, in private sales, whispered transactions, and legendary collector circles, because not every valuable coin appears at public auction, and some of the most valuable pieces ever known trade hands quietly between elite collectors who understand exactly what they're holding, and the 1953 DWEAT penny has long been associated with such whispers, especially when it comes to the possibility of extreme double die obverse or reverses that were never officially cataloged but are known to exist in fragmentary examples, because double dies occur when a coin die receives multiple misaligned impressions from the hub during its creation, causing design elements like lettering, dates, and Lincoln's profile to appear doubled, sometimes subtly and sometimes so dramatically that even the naked eye can see it. And while the most famous double die cent is the 1955 double die, collectors know that other years also produced double dies, some of which remain underreported or misunderstood, and in the case of the 1953 DWEAT penny, there are documented minor double dies and strong speculation of ultra-rare major double dies that either exist in extremely small numbers or remain undiscovered in full dramatic form, and if such a coin were found with bold doubling on the date, the word liberty, or the motto "I in God we trust," combined with a sharp strike and high grade, the value would immediately skyrocket, because rarity combined with condition is the lifeblood of coin valuation, and that's only the beginning, because another major factor in the $12 million valuation discussion is the repunched mint mark, something that modern collectors often overlook because mint marks are now added to dies digitally. But in 1953 mint marks were punched into each working die by hand, and that manual process introduced countless opportunities for error, including mint marks that were punched more than once in slightly different positions, creating overlapping or doubled mint marks, and the Denver Mint mark, a small d beneath the date, is particularly important here, because some 1953 D cents show clear evidence of repunching, with secondary impressions visible under magnification. And while many repunched mint marks are relatively minor, a strong, dramatic repunched D with clear separation and visibility can command enormous premiums, especially if paired with other errors. And when collectors talk about a 1953 D wheat penny worth millions, they are almost always talking about a coin that combines multiple significant errors into one piece, such as a strong double die obverse paired with a dramatic repunched mint mark, something so rare that it borders on unique. And then there are off-metal strikes, one of the most fascinating and valuable categories of mint errors, because they represent coins struck on planchets intended for other denominations or even other years. And while most Lincoln cents of the era were struck on bronze planchets composed primarily of copper, there were other metals in use at the mint, including planchets for dimes, nickels, and even foreign coinage produced by the U.S. Mint. And if a 1953 D wheat penny were struck on a silver dime planchet, a brass foreign planchet, or another unintended metal, the result would be a coin that immediately defies expectations in weight, color, and composition. And such errors are among the most coveted in the hobby, because they are tangible evidence of a breakdown in the minting process. And verified off-metal strikes can command prices ranging from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars, but when combined with other errors and extreme rarity, the value can escalate dramatically, especially if the metal itself is precious or historically significant. And some collectors speculate about the possibility of a 1953 D cent struck on a leftover steel planchet, even though steel cents officially ended in 1943, because transitional errors, while extraordinarily rare, are not impossible, and a confirmed steel or wrong alloy 1953 D wheat penny would instantly become one of the most important error coins in American numismatic history, potentially justifying 7-figure or even 8-figure valuations. And that brings us to another fascinating category of errors associated with this coin: die breaks and cut errors, which occur when a die cracks or breaks during use, causing raised blobs or missing design elements on the struck coin. And while minor die cracks are common and often add only modest value, massive die breaks that obscure major portions of the design are far rarer. And a 1953 D wheat penny with a dramatic cut that covers part of Lincoln's portrait or obliterates sections of the wheat ears on the reverse would stand out immediately, especially if the break progressed over time and the coin represents a late-stage die failure, because collectors love coins that tell a story of mechanical stress and eventual breakdown. And when such a coin is unique or nearly so, the value becomes whatever a top collector is willing to pay. And then there are die clashes, which happen when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, transferring portions of the design from one die to the other. And while many die clashes are faint, some are incredibly strong, leaving ghostly images of wheat ears on Lincoln's face or parts of his profile appearing on the reverse. Last. Today, whether you're a long-time collector, a curious beginner, or someone who just stumbled upon an old penny in a jar and wondered if it might secretly be worth a fortune, because today we're diving deep into one of the most legendary and mysterious coins in American numismatic history, the 1955 wheat penny, a humble 1-cent coin that has captured imaginations for decades and, in the most extraordinary cases tied to its rarest errors and mistakes, has been rumored to command values reaching as high as $9 million. And while that number sounds unbelievable for something that once bought a piece of candy or sat unnoticed in loose change, by the end of this journey you'll understand how a perfect storm of history, minting chaos, human error, rarity, condition, collector psychology, and enduring legend transformed a simple copper coin into a symbol of hidden treasure. Because the story of the 1955 wheat penny is not just about metal and machinery but about moments in time when things went slightly wrong in exactly the right way, creating numismatic lightning in a bottle. And to understand why this penny can be worth such staggering sums, we need to step back into the mid-1950s, a period when the United States was booming economically after World War II, factories were running at full tilt, the demand for coinage was massive, and the U.S. Mint was under immense pressure to produce coins quickly and efficiently to keep up with circulation needs, which is precisely the kind of environment where mistakes are most likely to happen, and among all the coins produced during that era, none gained more fame than the 1955 wheat penny, officially known as the Lincoln wheat cent, designed by Victor David Brenner, featuring Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent on the reverse, a design that had been in use since 1909 and would soon be replaced in 1959 by the Lincoln Memorial reverse, making the wheat penny era itself feel nostalgic and finite. But what truly sets the 1955 issue apart is not its design or composition, which was the standard bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, but the dramatic errors that occurred during its production, especially the most famous of all, the 1955 double die obverse. An error so visually striking that even non-collectors can spot it with the naked eye, and this error alone is the foundation upon which the legend of the $9 million penny is built. Because the double die error occurred not during the striking of the coin but during the creation of the die itself, when the working die received multiple misaligned impressions from the hub, resulting in double design elements that would be transferred onto every coin struck by that die, and in the case of the 1955 double die obverse, the doubling is bold, dramatic, and unmistakable, most notably on the date, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust," where the letters appear thick, shadowed, and almost vibrating, as if 2 images were stamped slightly apart, and unlike minor doubling that can be subtle or caused by machine vibration, this was a true double die, meaning the error was baked into the die itself, making every coin it produced a genuine error rather than a one-off strike anomaly. And according to numismatic history, this die was used at the Philadelphia Mint, which at the time did not place mint marks on pennies, and it is believed that approximately 20,000 to 24,000 of these double die cents were released into circulation before the error was discovered, which might sound like a lot until you consider how many billions of pennies were struck overall and how many of those double die coins were spent, lost, damaged, or worn down over decades of circulation, leaving only a fraction surviving today in collectible condition. And among those survivors, the condition of the coin becomes everything, because a heavily worn example with visible doubling might be worth thousands or tens of thousands, but a pristine, uncirculated example with blazing original luster, sharp strike, and no distractions becomes exponentially rarer and more valuable. And this is where the theoretical and sometimes headline-grabbing valuations of millions of dollars come into play, because in numismatics, value is not just about rarity but about the intersection of rarity, demand, condition, and story, and the 1955 double die wheat penny has one of the greatest stories of any U.S. coin, a story that includes factory pressure, human oversight, public discovery, media attention, and decades of collector fascination, and as word spread in the mid-1950s that some 1955 pennies showed dramatic doubling, people began checking their change, kids searched through rolls of pennies, and newspapers reported on the error, creating one of the first mainstream coin crazes in American history, which further cemented the coin's legendary status. And even though the Mint reportedly tried to pull some of the error coins back, many had already entered circulation, ensuring that the mistake could never be fully erased. And beyond the famous double die obverse, the 1955 wheat penny is also associated with other errors and anomalies that add layers to its mystique, including repunched mint marks on other denominations of the era, die cracks, cuds, off-center strikes, planchet defects, and improper alloy mixtures. And while not all of these errors occurred specifically on 1955 wheat pennies in large numbers, the era itself is fertile ground for error collecting, and when a coin already famous for one error is discovered with an additional anomaly, its desirability can skyrocket, creating unique specimens that exist as one of one or one of few pieces, and it is these unique combinations of errors, preserved in exceptional condition, that fuel the possibility of multi-million-dollar valuations, because in the upper echelons of collecting, wealthy collectors are not just buying coins, they are buying singular artifacts that no one else can own, and when 2 or 3 collectors with deep pockets compete for such an artifact at auction, prices can reach astonishing heights, and while the commonly cited $9 million figure represents an extreme upper boundary rather than a typical market price, it reflects what could theoretically happen if the finest known example of a 1955 double-die wheat penny, perhaps with additional errors or an extraordinary provenance, were to appear at auction in a heated bidding environment, especially if accompanied by media attention and the narrative of the ultimate error penny, and provenance plays a surprisingly important role in such valuations, because a coin that can be traced back to an original roll, a famous collection, or a well-documented discovery story gains an extra layer of appeal, transforming it from a mere object into a piece of history with a documented journey, and collectors often pay premiums for coins with pedigrees tied to legendary figures or landmark sales, and in the case of the 1955 double die, many examples were discovered in original rolls shortly after release, some reportedly coming from cigarette vending machine change or bank rolls, and coins with intact original surfaces from such sources are particularly prized. And then there is the matter of authentication and grading, which cannot be overstated, because the value of a 1955 wheat penny hinges on whether the doubling is genuine or the result of common machine doubling, and only professional grading services can definitively attribute a true double die, and the difference between a genuine double die and a look-alike can be the difference between a few dollars and a life-changing sum, which is why stories abound of people finding what they believe to be a rare penny only to discover it is not the right variety. And this fuels both hope and caution in the hobby, but for those who do find a genuine 1955 double-die obverse wheat penny, the experience can be transformative, because suddenly a small piece of copper becomes a tangible connection to history and potential wealth, and the fascination doesn't stop there, because collectors also analyze strike quality, die state, and subtle diagnostics, such as the strength of the doubling on specific letters, the presence of die markers, and the overall sharpness of the design, and early die state examples, struck before the die began to wear, show the clearest and most dramatic doubling, making them especially valuable, and when such an early die state coin survives in mint state condition, free of carbon spots, fingerprints, or discoloration, it becomes the kind of coin that advanced collectors dream about and museums would be proud to display.